Okay, T10ers, today what we're going to do is make measurements at the ECM. We have to, we're going to start off with a real life problem, PO335, and there's something wrong with the crankshaft position sensor. This is a PM generator AC signal that comes from the crankshaft position sensor. You have any, and any is the crankshaft signal, any plus and minus, even though it's AC voltage, just believe that. There's two diodes in there too, so that's what we call a buffer, and the ECM is changing the AC signal to a DC signal. Also, there's shielding. There's shielding, either a bare wire or a foil wrap on this wire so it doesn't get any problems or connections. Wanted to point out also too that in the EWD you have 76109. Hey, let's go back to the code for a second. 76109. So that kind of both the EWD and the actual code page shows out for that. Okay. Also want to point out on the EWD you have the letters B here, so that means, and there's also a reference on the EWD, B will be connector E26, so we're going to focus on connector E26. Hey, look, E26. The crankshaft 2-pin connector is E72. All right, so there's the specs of the crankshaft, and if you go step by step, I think they tell you to disconnect it at the crankshaft position sensor, measure ohms resistance. You got a cold and a hot resistance and stuff like that. What I want to do is show you how to measure it at the ECM. That may save you some time once in a while. So what we'll do is we'll take this connector off and back probe it or front probe it. I'll show you a technique for that. Also, how do you find those two terminals? Well, you got E26, A25. This is out of the repair manual. This is terminals of the ECM. This is out of the EWD, and it shows us a front view. This is your back view, which is a little bit confusing, but this is actually your front view. Whenever you're probing ECMs, make sure you're looking at the front view, not the back view, because it gets pretty confusing. All right, here's the actual ECM picture of the camera we're going to play with. You can't see it in the pictures, but there's little numbers in the corners. What I always try to look for is the little number in the corner to orientate myself to where the connector is. Also, if I'm in the EWD and if I'm looking for 76 and 109, I can click those, turn them pink, and go from there. Of course, I'm not looking for terminal 1. Okay, but at least it gives me a reference. There's also a 31 down there that correlates with that, and then there'll be numbers in the corners and stuff, just so you're holding the ECM connector in the right way. All right, so let's go to an actual ECM connector, and then we'll go out to the car. This is a part 1 of 2 parts, and so here's an ECM connector. There's also on the crankshaft sensor, this might be, this isn't for that vehicle or whatever, but you have 2 wires and then a ground wire. That's that shielding that they mentioned. And you want to be careful too, because if you go into a harness like this, the crankshaft sensor is wrapped around with this, and you won't see the wires that you're looking for. You would have to actually go right at the ECM. Now, by the book, we're supposed to find the connector and back probe the wire like this and push it in until we get a connector and then measure it. There's a cover over this, a tie wrap that holds it on place, stuff like that. So I'd say this is difficult. Also, too, in T10, if we're doing this 20, 30 times a class over a couple of years, that could really take the toll on the vehicle. So I propose a new way to check it, and I'm going to say if you do it right, it's pretty accurate. Okay. What we want to do first is grab a piece of wire. Okay, and I strip it down, and I keep this next to the T-pins and the jumper wires. I'm going to grab one piece of wire. I'm going to take I always like handless connections. I don't want to be holding the DVOM or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is squeeze it like this, wrap it around a couple times. Sometimes you want to, wrap it around and stuff like that. And then I have my wire on a connector. Then I'm going to look at the cavity I want. I'm just going to go for any cavity. When we go out to the car, we'll go to the real one. Let's say it's this one. Well, I'm going to put my glasses on. It's kind of hard with the photography. That's a whole lot better. So I'm just going to poke a hole, and I'm pushing it in as far as it'll go. And then what I'll do is I'll clip it to the connector like that. Usually I'll have the bungee cord on the wires and the cables going there, and then that way I just put the DVOM on this way. Now these are really small pins. These are larger pins. What I like to do, instead of throwing away connectors, I'll take old male connector like so, and that would be good to back probe that. I could get a reading on that. Also on the wires, instead of having fray wires at the very end, I like to strip it an inch or so away, and what I'll do is I'll just put my jumper cable right there to get a good reading. Now on the bigger connectors, you can use a T-pin and you can stick it in here. Don't ever let me catch you sticking a T-pin on these small connectors, because what that happens is it'll open up the connector and you'll have an intermittent connection there, and that won't work very good at all. All right, just one other thing I want to show you while I got this here is a junction block connector. You'll see this doesn't go actually to the ECM, but to a bunch of other circuits, and we have 3 color different wires going to this. And what this does is a quick way to splice a lot of different wires together, whether they be ground, powers, or whatever. I guess the brown and the whites, I'm sure, are grounds. The blue and the white might be power, but they're not all connected together. They're actually, if you hold it up to light, you can see which is connected to which. But sometimes if you're diagnosing these circuits and it has one of these junction connectors in it, it's a nice place to check a lot of different points. All right, so what we're going to do is go out to the car for part 2 of ECM measuring.